I do not see Dr. Kamila Heather on any of the screens.
Kamla Haider, Kamla, can you say a few words, please?
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Shall I start?
Okay,
Can you
so
see me?
can you see Kamla Hashim Raza sir?
Yes.
I can.
Okay, so if you Kamla, just give me 1 second and I will then come back to you. So I'll just make a very quick start, let people know that we are recording, and then I'll hand over to you as a moderator, Kamla. Is that okay? So Assalamu alaikum everybody. On behalf of APNE, we would like to welcome you to this highly informative and useful webinar. I'm looking forward to it. My name is Dr. Amir Bernie and I'm the president of APNE. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to my co-moderator today, Dr. Kamla Haider, who will be running the proceedings. So over to you, Kamla.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amir Bernie. So, Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening to all our participants, to our listeners, to the members of APNE Society here. This is our first glorious webinar session, which is hosted by the Mental Health Task Force from Association of Pakistani Physicians of Northern Europe, which is famously called as APNE, and I'm sure nobody is unaware of this name APNE these days, whoever, especially who is on Facebook. There's so much going on with this group, and we are the core group of this APNE, which is the Mental Health Task Force, and I will tell you why we found the need to produce this Mental Health Task Force within APNE. Today, our evening chair will be Dr. Hashim Raza. I'm going to introduce him in a minute. And our speaker will be Dr. Lubna Anwar. Today's topic is coping with loss and bereavement during the pandemic. And I'm sure you'll all appreciate that this year, 2020, has been a difficult year so far. And as a team, we felt that we need to have a topic like that to address the issues which has been faced primarily by the healthcare workers. So the Mental Health Task Force, the main reason that we have this is that we have seen that during this pandemic and even out of the pandemic, there are a lot of mental health issues that are being addressed or unaddressed. And through this webinar sessions, we have taken this task to take these problems to our healthcare colleagues. This evening, as I said, the chair will be Dr. Hashim Raza. I'm going to introduce him. He's a graduate of King Edward Medical College, Lahore in Pakistan, and he's a consultant psychiatrist at Oxley's NHS Foundation Trust in Southeast London. He has served in leadership roles at Oxley's and London region and is currently the chair of Informatics Committee of the Royal College of Psychiatrists. Welcome, Dr. Hashim Raza, to this meeting today. Dr. Lubna Anwar will be introduced by Dr. Hashim. Before that, I would like to tell you that this session is going to be live on Facebook. And if you have any questions, you can also enter into this webinar session through the link, or you could also give us this questions on the Facebook. And my task will be to streamline the questions and put it to the chair and to Dr. Lubna Anwar today. So over to you, Dr. Hashim Raza, without any delay. Thank you. I think, Dr. Hashim, you're muted, so you need to unmute yourself.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Kamila, and apologies for the glitches with the IT. Has to happen with the chair of Informatics Committee. But it is my pleasure to introduce Lubna, who has been a colleague in many different roles. In previous jobs, we have worked together. Lubna is a consultant psychiatrist. She is doubly qualified, also trained and qualified as a medical psychotherapist in cognitive analytical therapy and in transpersonal psychotherapy. And she currently works in Barnet, Enfield and Haringey Trust, which is in North London. And I know Lubna has got a wonderful presentation, which is going to take approximately 40 minutes. So I am not going to take any more of the time and handing over to Lubna for her presentation, but to explain to the participants that between Dr. Kamila Haider and myself, we are keeping an eye on the chat window. If participants please post your questions straight into the chat window, then between Kamila and I, we will make sure that we pass some of those questions and hand them over and put them over to Lubna at the end of presentation. So over to you, Lubna.
Thank you very much, Hashim, for this kind introduction. We go back a long way, over 20 years, I must say. I just need my presentation to be, I can share the screen if the host disabled the participant. So I just need to really bring my presentation on the screen.
I shall be doing that, Lubna. Give me 1 second. I will put you in.
Meanwhile, I'd like to thank APNE to give me this platform to talk about this highly emotive topic. You know, my presentation is not an academic exercise. It is meant to just provide us with some space to understand our individual and collective subjective experiences on loss and grieving. Keeping that in mind, I've introduced some self-reflection questions for participants. So as we go along, you know, they can make a mental note of the responses or jot them down on paper if it is handy. I would request you not to think too hard, please, because I just want you to trust your first response that arises in your mind. And also note the feelings associated for being asked the question. Is it causing frustration or if there is avoidance? And after each question, I'll pause for a few moments before continuing to talk with the talk. In the end, I would present you with a few options, and you may choose, you know, amongst them to do what to do with your answers. So, shall we? I'm waiting for the presentation so that we can all share a single screen.
Technology and its challenges.
I know. I mean, do I need to send the presentation to Amir?
No, you should be able to join. You should be able to share it from your end. I've enabled it, so you should.
Oh, you've enabled it.
Yes, yes, it has been enabled since the beginning. So try it, please, sharing the screen.
Okay. Can you all see it?
Yes.
We do.
Excellent. Excellent.
Carry on.
So I've already introduced my talk. Let me just, this is the weight of grief. This is what grief can do to us. It's heavy, it weighs us down. This sculpture made by an American artist depicts it very well. Thank you to my colleague Lisa Mazing to bringing that to my attention. We all know rationally that loss is inevitable in life, and ultimately everything which is in creation perishes with time. But understanding and managing the pain associated with loss is still harder. No two grief reactions are similar. Now, human beings, being meaning-making organisms, attempt to give meaning to their experiences according to the stories they carry, the conditioning, the templates in their mind. So naturally, what we value most in life, we also dread losing it most. There could be fears around our own demise, our loved ones, relationships, health, homes, possessions, work, status, you name it. So we also have expectations and assumptions about the norms of when and how the world and nature around us should work. And if those expectations for some reason are challenged, we find the grieving more intolerable. The process of mourning is important. It frees up the energy bound to the lost object, experience, or an object or a person, so that we might reinvest that energy somewhere else. So it's adaptive, it's normal. Healthy grieving results in our ability to remember the importance of our loss and carry life forward. These are the factors which modify coping with loss. The list is not exhaustive, but I will mention a few which I think are important and necessary. The closeness of relationship with the lost person is important, but some relationships are complicated, and grieving can be more difficult in those relationships. Not necessarily it is all a very loving relationship. Sometimes when we are ambivalent about relationships, it can be even harder. Extreme ends of age are vulnerable groups. Child being egocentric, thinks that the world revolves around him, and so may think that he's responsible for the death of or a loss of a parent. An elderly person, on the other hand, is not egocentric in that way, but is dependent on others to care for him or her. So the loss felt can be intense, and both extreme of age, their grief is usually not recognized as important, sometimes because the child is really either full of joy or full of sorrow, and so it is sometimes we can miss the signs of grief. Social acceptability of the cause of death is another factor that we need to be mindful of. Death by suicide, for example, may be stigmatizing or considered unacceptable. So grieving process can be harder for those left behind. Some people have mentioned about the coping style or personality type. So people avoidant of confrontation, it is studied that likely to cope with grief with some struggle. Introverted thinkers, introverted feelers, more difficult to cope with grief because of their dominant function according to the personality types of Jung. This is my first question to you. What is your most feared loss? A sculpture in a cemetery in Rome made by William Story in memory of his wife. He wrote, "It represents the angel of grief in utter abandonment, throwing herself with drooping wings and hidden face over a funeral altar. It represents what I feel. It represents prostration. Yes, to do it helps me." So grief reaction is never just an emotional reaction. It is multidimensional. Just to remind us how in various ways it can affect us, let me go through this slide as it is. Emotionally, shock, guilt, anger, irritability, rage, despair, regret, anxiety, loneliness, denial, skepticism, yearning, sadness, worry, self-pity, envy, fear, hopelessness. Physically, there could be sensations, tightness and heaviness in chest and throat, nausea, upset stomach, dizziness, headaches, physical numbness, muscle weakness or tensions or fatigue. There is vulnerability to illness or getting ill physically. Behaviorally, disturbed behavior could be disturbed. Sleeplessness, aggression, irritability, self-isolation and searching can occur. Cognitively, there are doubts, ruminations, memories, confusion, disorganization, lack of motivation, illusions, misperception, dream depicting loss. There are also spiritual questioning about faith, feeling abandoned by God, affirming connection with God, searching of meaning of loss. Philosophically, there are also questions about meaning and purpose in life. This is my second question to you. What is the name you would give to your grief? We all are very familiar with 5 stages of grief by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. It's one of the earliest models proposed by her. Not scientifically rigorous, but nevertheless liked by most because it gives us a structure and it gives us a scaffolding on which to build our interventions. A 6th stage has been added to it now by David Kessler, which I will come a little bit later, which is finding meaning. It is a linear, clean model with no messiness, but she also recognized that grief doesn't work like that. What to expect during times of grief? This is how normal grief behaves like. With oscillations and vacillations between despair and relief, disorganization and feeling in control, hopelessness and hopefulness. My experience of grieving in recent times has been something like this. A lot of worry about everyone and everything, and many unanswered questions and bearing uncertainty. Is my friend who's taken ill going to make it? Is my dad and my siblings safe and well in various parts of the world? Are my children observing safety measures? Do my colleagues have enough face masks? Are my trainees coping well whilst being redeployed? How can we ensure our patients get their treatment on time? There was little time to process anything when normal structures of delivery of care were being dismantled and new were being put in place. So the priority was safety and speed. I felt mentally and physically exhausted. It is only after things have slowed down that I have experienced a surge of emotions overcoming me. I know I'm grieving now. My third question is, what is the most profound feeling, memory, thought, or sensations you associate your grief with? This is an artist's interpretation of who has been affected by the pandemic. It's named Coexistence, done by a mural artist, Brazilian artist, Eduardo Kubra. Pandemic does not differentiate between caste, creed, color, religious affiliation, rich or poor, but it has highlighted differences in the outcome of those who got ill in certain communities and groups. I'm sure we all would like to understand this better with good research. COVID-19 pandemic is a collective crisis. It brought us against an unseen enemy and made us change the way we lived in a very fundamental way. It brought a sudden halt to our lives with fear and uncertainty. It exposed the vulnerability of our systems to cope with it. Our comfort zones shrank considerably. We were in our busy bubbles of safety and survival. Thinking about the pandemic made me compare how people coped with their loss during the pandemic about a century ago, the Spanish flu. 1918 is considered a forgotten year because there is very little commemorative expression compared to the enormity of loss. There were some 50 million people dead. 1/3 of the world's population was infected. And with lack of commemoration, grief and recovery from it were often very private. Perhaps the collective psyche was in so much pain that it lashed on the first opportunity to ditch the grieving in favor of celebration for the end of World War I. This is perfectly understandable reaction under those circumstances. But nevertheless, we get some account from early 20th century literary figure Virginia Woolf, who described the grieving she saw during the Spanish flu pandemic. She actually got infected by the virus too. She says, this late age of the world's experience had bred in them all men and women, a well of tears. She reflects, tears and sorrows, courage and endurance, a perfectly upright and stoical bearing. In 1918, she wrote, I was kept in bed 8 days, divorced from my pen, a whole current of life cut off. In 1919, she says, I thought I was probably dying, but Dr. Ferguson says it's only the nerves of the heart go wrong after influenza. In 1920, I don't like influenza. More illness followed in 1922, 23, and 25, alongside her mental health terrors and tooth extractions, which were thought bizarrely to reduce fever and infection. I think she may be actually talking about sequelae to influenza, and perhaps a neuropsychiatric sequel. This is a subjective account of some of the people who got infected and suffered. I could tell the nurses were as scared as me. They told me my coronavirus test was positive, as if I was going to die. I was within a whisper of a very dark place. I perhaps felt most vulnerable at nights. My oxygen levels used to drop at nights. Ward was always short of staff at that time too. In my sleep, I would feel as if I would not make it through the night. I have memories of doing salah. In my delirious state, I would read surahs, part from Quran. It somehow gave me comfort. It is like something out of a movie. I thought maybe my time is up, but I wanted to live. It makes you think, sod bloody work. When this is over, we are having fun. It's baby steps, but we are slowly getting there. You can see fear, despair, hopelessness, surreal, wanting to live, also wanting to escape and run away. It is not just the loss of life itself or that of physical health during a pandemic. There are a multitude of losses, usually occurring concurrently. I'm not going to talk about all of these, but we'll mention the importance of loss of control during grieving, as this single psychological process has been found to underpin many other grief behaviors. So as the loss makes one feel not in control of their reaction or the world around them, the first thing a person may do unconsciously is to reassert the control over their world. One can obsess unceasingly. And this gives them illusion of safety. It's adaptive. Friends and family, on the other hand, can also appear or become controlling because they're trying to help. So it can set up a very difficult dynamic, which makes it harder to process grief emotionally. And it can become a negative sense of wanting to control. Because the person actually is feeling that they are responsible. They are the one who can put things right. My next question is, what do you consider as your loss during the pandemic? This is a child's drawing depicting loss and trauma. Perhaps it represents the child in us, keeping a brave face but feeling scared and deeply hurt inside. Different types of grief reactions are to be expected during the crisis. There's traumatic grief, prolonged grief, anticipatory grief, delayed grief, and I'll talk very little about each of them. Traumatic grief, fear-fueled grief. There is threat to safety in addition to loss-based. It is going to evoke fight, flight, freeze response, stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline are high, endorphins, oxytocin levels low, serotonin low, dopamine low. This internal chemistry can make anybody wobble. As we perceive threat, it results in activation of attachment systems, which is our relational blueprint. So seeking comfort, being with somebody, wanting to be consoled, securing oneself becomes a priority. We tend to regress under threat. Primitive psychological defense mechanisms can become operational. Denial, projection, dissociation are more likely to be used. Getting rid of bad feelings by projecting onto others can result in excessive blame and criticism. Holding others accountable for the misfortune, what we are suffering, is one way it shows itself. We also become sensitized to feel all perceived and actual threat quite acutely. And we are reminded of previous hurts and losses again. So everything is amplified. People who have been previously traumatized and those having multiple losses are particularly at risk. Poor tolerance of arousal is characteristic of traumatized individuals. Frontline healthcare staff who saw multiple deaths of people they were caring are also at risk group. So anticipatory grief refers to a feeling of grief occurring before an impending or dreaded loss. The grief experience before the loss does not reduce the grief experience after the loss. There are some groups who are more likely to experience that. Families and friends of people ill with infection, frontline healthcare staff again, looking after ill people and seeing them die later. Certain groups like Black and ethnic minority group community members, they were thinking, who's going to be next? We lost 3 members of Black and ethnic minority group in our organization. Prolonged grief is another type of grief which may occur, and it is understandable. There's inability to say goodbye. We can't put a closure to, we can't move towards a closure. Inability to mourn or perform funeral rites, lack of usual support mechanisms, being physically ill, shielding, quarantine, physical distancing. And the consequences we know is loss of function, mental and physical health complications, socioeconomic problems, loss of relationships. What keeps the grief prolonged is disbelief, anger, protest or blame, survivor's guilt. Sometimes miswanting means knowing that the person has gone, but still wanting, and counterfactual thinking, I could have done this. Kind of thinking, avoidance, all prolonged grief. I've seen survivor guilt quite a bit in a group of people I met, those who were bereaved during the Glenfell Tower fire in recent times. So survivor guilt is quite an important thing which can prolong grief. Delayed grief, research has not shown it to be a very prevalent type. It's rare, but delayed emergence of trauma symptoms is commoner. Leads me to my next question, which is, do you recognize experiencing any of the grief reaction mentioned earlier? This is a sea turtle. It's an animal symbol of resilience. It is one of the longest living animal on the planet. The qualities we associate with resilience are ability to stay grounded even in the moments of disturbance and chaos, patience, slowing down, pacing oneself, emotional understanding, determination, and persistence. 4 trajectories following grief or in potentially traumatic events have been identified by researchers. Recently means in the last 10 years more so, with rigorous research techniques. The group is the Columbia University, George Bonanno and colleagues. The research came from those bereaved after September 11th terrorist attack in New York and SARS epidemic in Hong Kong. And his research challenged the old notion of, by some of the eminent psychologists, including Bowlby, that those who do not show grief are either superficially adjusted or have some pathology. He concluded that resilience to loss is very common. And resilience is more than just simple absence of psychopathology. It has shown that bereaved people who exhibit or on that trajectory express positive emotions while talking about their loss and report gaining comfort from positive memories of a deceased person. And when their friends were asked to rate them anonymously, they rated them as well-adjusted people before the loss when compared to those who are symptomatically bereaved or even non-bereaved people. So what are the tasks of mourning? James Warden described 4 tasks of mourning, and those are usually used as a kind of a base on which the bereavement counseling is placed to help others. Acceptance of loss is important because without it, you cannot bring a closure to your loss. Acknowledge the pain of loss, even though it is harder. That is that to bear the pain with self and with others, adjust to the new environment without the person or thing lost, and reinvesting in the reality of a new life, that is to plan ahead. And it's never a state model. It's not, it fluctuates, the process of mourning. So goodbyes and closures are important. How do we do that? Rituals for grieving are as old as humanity. Anthropological studies date these back as far back as 100,000 years. So human beings like to find meaning in symbols to express a deeper understanding of a relationship or an idea. These are socially sanctioned behaviors specific to each community and culture and present an opportunity to say goodbye to the lost object or person individually or collectively. And the use of ritual serves as a compensatory mechanism designed to restore feeling of control. And this increased feeling of control contributes to reduce grief. So studies show that in complicated grief, personal rituals seem to help more than the collective rituals. Grief built the Taj Mahal or love built the Taj Mahal? I leave it to you to decide. Maybe the capacity to grieve is directly related to the capacity to love. My next question is, which ritual have you ever used to say goodbye to a lost person, pet, or an object? During times of extreme change, chaos, uncertainty, when we feel depleted and have few answers, we are more inclined to look for deeper understanding offered to us by various spiritual and faith traditions. Most of them tell us about the transitory nature of life and its strife, and to give importance to what matters most. In some traditions, afterlife; in others, nirvana or mukti is the ultimate aim. This guides the healing process for many. 12th century Persian Sufi Abu Hamid al-Ghazali said, "A person who owns some snow wouldn't hesitate to trade it for jewels and pearls." So life's circumstances are like snow. When the sun comes out, it all melts. While the next world, the world of your heart, is like a precious stone that remains. I've never been able to forget this image. Surrendering to the higher power in the face of adversity. This was a devastating earthquake in Azad Kashmir, Pakistan in 2005. People lost everything. Giving control and power to what you regard highest is shown to help the process of mourning, grief, and overcoming loss, in addition to helping with some very challenging behaviors like addictions. So I'm going to propose next a few ways for individual and collective coping and healing. The principle underpinning these revolve around cultivating a sense of safety and ensuring healthy space around you. These improve our psychological immunity and helps integrate our sensory motor system, bodily system, with cortical cognitive processes, means bottom up, top down approach, actually integrating both. Try to see how many of these you're already using intuitively as strategies. Establish personal routines. Eat and sleep at regular times. Create balance between activity and repose. Slow down. Spend time with family and friends. Engage in walks and regular physical workout. Stop when self-blame and criticism arises. Be aware of survivor's guilt emerging. Create healing quiet space at home. Spend time in nature. Create indoor garden, plant seeds and see them grow. Engage in grounding activities, prayers and meditation. Keep a journal. Declutter. Create physical space. Avoid overload with information. Create space in mind. Think of a personal ritual to say goodbye to a lost friend. These are all individual coping and healing strategies. These are few for collective coping and healing. Share your thoughts and feelings with family members and friends. Socialize regularly, virtually or in person. Do not miss an opportunity to share laughs and tears with others. Engage in a collective ritual to remember the lost member of family or friend. Do something for a person in need. Engage in voluntary work with others. Commemorate collectively through art, literature, poetry, and other ways. This is coping and healing as a health professional. Be safe, protect yourself, and you will be protecting others. Remain engaged with teams, services, and colleagues. Avoid avoidance. Prioritize at work. Take a break from your office at regular intervals, even if you're working from home. Put some plants in your office and attend to them regularly. Create reflective space. Allow time to discuss areas of concern, patient care, and coping at work with colleagues. Be patient with others' communication. You do not know what stress they may be carrying today. Ask them, pick up the phone and speak to them. Ask for help. Being with the bereaved as a health professional, our job. Allow others to tell their story. Use active listening. Do not force questions. Don't interrupt them. Do not pathologize. Maintain non-judgmental validating stance. Be patient. Provide gentle guidance. Have faith and trust in others' ability to recover. This is my last question. Which coping strategy has worked best for you? This is, you can choose what to do with your self-reflection, any of this. See what you feel about it. Sharing your self-reflection with a family member or a friend. You can create a journal based on your answers. You can write your life story. Express your answers in drawing or painting. Take a picture representing your grief and your resilience and put them together. Dedicate a song or a poem to your experiences and journey. Or consider revisiting painful unresolved losses with the help of a trained professional. Many of us are wounded healers. It is the helix. It is another symbol of resilience. It's found abundant in nature. It is core of our being. It is our DNA. I'd like to finish my talk here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lubna. You covered very nicely, a very even paced, lots of material that you had gathered and summarized. Thank you very much for that. We have about 18 people logged into the webinar, and recognizing a few names, there is at least one dear friend, colleague from all the way from Iraq logged in. So we do have some international participation. So I'm still waiting for the questions to arrive. There have been few comments complimenting you on your presentation.
Oh, thank you.
So taking the lead myself, I thought in the last couple of slides, you very gently and politely hinted at seeking professional help. That if things are, getting a bit stuck, how to seek help professionally. And linking with that, if I suggest to you or invite you to comment that with so many teams in so many health services, struggling with the daily challenges, whether the losses in personal life, giving up contact with the near and dear ones, not being able to go back and mix with the family, and giving up some of the creature comforts of the routine life on one side, and then feeling kind of helpless and impotent in the face of this challenging disease we know so little about, and losing their patients. We don't have enough counselors around who can help them and hold their hand, especially when the fight is still continuing. So in a long-winded way, the question, how do you think with your expertise as a therapist, what can they possibly do, expanding a bit more on the bullet points you shared with us in your slides?
So I think there are many levels that one can be helped and approached. The organizational level or a personal level, and in between many other levels. But I think that it is actually a marriage between, both. You're absolutely right that we don't have a lot of resource. Actually, the resource we all had also was not available as it should. So it means that people are really, really left on their own devices, especially those very vulnerable ones. We're expecting a surge in their decline in their mental health, physical health. We are expecting that people will come forward when the lockdown is going to be eased off. So at a very, what was observed was that at a very personal level, it was the the feeling around in the community, our neighborhoods, which actually was gave a kind of a sense of a unified front, that sense of belonging. So that community did come together, because I think everybody knew that there was very little available. But on the other hand, if we look at the organizational level, this is where the leadership and the culture of the organization comes into it. Most of our organizations are paternalistic in a way that they're very good at putting policies and structures and governance, but the maternal function of organizations. So I would just say that, for example, we started thinking now about it, reflective practice in every team, people having time, space in corridors, in having, across the rooms, having just that connection, facilitating it, making sure that we have groups of, especially the vulnerable groups, identified in the staff, that they can meet up. They have a forum, they can go, and and the leadership listens. There is a communication up and down, because it is not just the personal life, it's the professional life where we spend most of our time, and there is a lot of people want to give over and above what they have, energy-wise or dedication-wise. So it is about really seeing that the organization at every level is providing them maternal function.
Thank you, Dr. Lubna. Thank you so much. I think your talk was very comprehensive, and you have covered a lot in not only your the way I think you were very calculated and contented while you were giving your talk as well. We have a few comments and questions coming up, and I would like to mention them because on Facebook, Dr. Muniza Qureshi, she has mentioned that my loss of control during the COVID crisis was understanding of emotions, mainly humor and laughter and difficulty assimilating. I think, Muniza, this is a very good comment, and we do appreciate and thank you for joining us tonight. There is another question that has come up, and I want you to answer this very briefly because we are running short of time. What could be a role of death anniversary in dealing with grief?
Very important. Actually, before we know it, we are going to, have the anniversary will be coming soon. Death anniversary is very important, like other rituals. That is, we go to bereaved families for a few days. In different cultures, it's 7 days. In some cultures, 40 days. Anniversaries like that. Revisiting, seeing that the family of the bereaved is coping well, and also showing them your own allegiance, your own concern about them. Exactly. I think marks a kind of, and also helps people to look forward, support them in that.
In the fact that that anniversary, I think you've explained that it's very important. Shahab Qureshi, Dr. Shahab Qureshi has mentioned that resilience is a quality and attribute of humans, and I think it helps enormously in your fight with depression and COVID-related symptoms. I think he's given a very valid comment here. Dr. Hashim, would you like to add any comments that were given to us via the chats?
Thank you, Camilla. Dr. Naila Salim has, complimented, thanked Lubna for her brilliant talk, and she has raised a question also. Do you think, Lubna, that people are at risk of experiencing traumatic grief following loss of a loved one due to this pandemic? And if I can just slip in another question raised by Shahid, that is there any possibility that one can prepare oneself for such a profound loss and challenge, as in the case of a pandemic, which people were able to see over the horizon? And we have got just about under a minute to respond to both of them.
So people can feel traumatized. It depends on the circumstances of death. So if it happened suddenly, it was not the time of death, the death happened prematurely, and also the person was not able to, people were picked from home on ambulances, taken away, they could not see it. It can be, and also it depends on the person who's left behind, whether they have any traumatic experience in the past, it will traumatize them again, more potential to do that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lubna. I think we're just running out of time, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. Dr. Hashim, would you give, like, in a few seconds, would you give your last comments, and then we will come to the close. So I was just saying that there are a lot of comments and questions coming up on Facebook. It's not possible to mention all of them during the talk here. You can go to Facebook and answer the questions, and just put the comments on the comments, whatever they are. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Dr. Hashim, over to you for a few seconds.
I just wanted to thank Lubna for such a detailed, comprehensive presentation on quite a vast subject, and it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you very much, Hashim. It's really
Dr. Hashim. I love that the idea that Taj Mahal was built on grief or love, and we can't comment on that. जिस तरह कहते हैं कि ऐ मौत तूने देर लगाई है किस लिए, इश्क का इम्तिहान है तेरा नहीं. इसी से, we'll take goodbye to this evening. It was a lovely evening, a wonderful talk by Dr. Lubna Anwar, and we'll see you next week, same time, Wednesday, 6 to 7. Allah Hafiz, and take care. See you next week.
Khuda Hafiz. Bye.
And before everybody goes, I would like to thank our chair, Dr. Hashim Raza Saab, our presenter, Dr. Lubna Anwar, and our moderator, Dr. Kamala Haider, for doing a fantastic job today. I'm sure we all found that webinar extremely useful. I did. I made some notes as well, and some mental notes as well, and I think it was a profound talk. I would like to thank the Mental Health Task Force being led by Mr. Hassan Javed, my other colleagues, Shai Latif, and many others in the Mental Health Task Force, the UPNE Mental Health Task Force, for initiating this webinar. So we will have more, inshallah. The next one is on the 15th of July, and we will be sending the links out soon and shortly. So thank you, everybody, on behalf of UPNE, and as president of UPNE, I really appreciate your efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Amarbani.
Thank you. Thank you, Ahmed.
So I'm going to stop recording.